Our perfect family vacation turned into a nightmare when two officers pulled us over, convinced we were criminals. They had no idea they'd just threatened a federal agent and his family. The salty air of Seacrest Point was supposed to be our escape. For 2 weeks I wasn't Special Agent Marcus Thorne. I was just Marcus. Just Dad. Just the guy who was hopelessly losing a sandcastle building competition against his 7-year-old son, Leo. My wife Sarah was laughing from a beach towel, her sunglasses pushed up on her head, looking more beautiful than the day I met her. Our 4-year-old daughter Maya was asleep on her chest, a tiny fist clutching a seashell. This was it. This was the peace I worked so hard for, the slice of normal life that felt a million miles away from my day job. We'd rented a big, comfortable SUV for the trip, the kind of car that screams, suburban family vacation. It was loaded with beach toys, coolers, and the happy exhaustion that comes from a long day under the sun. Driving back to our rented beach house after an early dinner, with the kids dozing in the back seat, I felt a deep, profound sense of contentment. The sky was a bruised purple, and the streetlights of the small, picturesque town were just beginning to flicker on. That's when I saw them. The flashing blue and red lights suddenly blooming in my rearview mirror, painting the inside of our car in strobes of panic. Sarah's hand immediately found my arm. "Marcus, what's going on? Were you speeding?" I glanced at the speedometer. 5 under the limit, I said, my voice already shifting. The calm, easygoing father receding as years of training took over. I pulled over smoothly, killed the engine, and put my hands on the steering wheel at the 10 and 2 position. "It's probably just a broken taillight or something." "Don't worry." But I knew it wasn't. I'd been a cop before I was an agent. I know the anatomy of a traffic stop. This one felt different. It felt hungry. A police cruiser, a big Ford Interceptor, had pulled up tight behind us. 2 officers got out. The one approaching my window was a stereotype. Thick neck, crew cut, and an expression that looked like he'd been sucking on a lemon his entire life. His partner, younger and leaner, stayed back near the rear of our SUV, his hand resting casually on his sidearm. I rolled down my window. The officer, whose name tag read Miller, leaned down, shining a blindingly bright flashlight directly into my eyes, then sweeping it over Sarah, and finally into the back, waking up the kids. Maya started to whimper. "License and registration," Miller grunted. "No. Good evening, no. Do you know why I pulled you over?" "Just a command." "Of course, officer," I said, my voice level. I kept my hands visible. "My wallet is in my back pocket and the registration is in the glove box. I'm going to reach for them slowly." I did exactly as I said, narrating every move. It was a de-escalation protocol I could recite in my sleep. He snatched the documents from my hand and examined them under his flashlight beam. "Marcus Thorne," he said, drawing out my name as if it tasted foul. He looked from my ID back to my face. "This is a nice vehicle. You folks from around here?" The question hung in the air, heavy and loaded. "No, sir," I said, keeping my tone respectful. "We're just on vacation. Rented the car at the airport." He grunted again, a sound of profound disbelief. He walked the documents back to his car, leaving us marinating in the flashing lights and our own anxiety. Sarah was trying to soothe Maya, who was now crying properly. Leo was sitting bolt upright, his eyes wide with fear. "This is ridiculous, Marcus," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling with anger. "What did we do?" "We didn't do anything," I said, trying to project a calm I didn't feel. My own internal threat assessment was running hot. The posture of the second officer, the aggressive questioning, the complete lack of professional courtesy, it was all textbook harassment. They weren't looking for a traffic violation. They were fishing. Miller returned to my window, handing my license and registration back. For a second, I thought it was over. Then he leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial growl. "I'm going to be honest with you, Mr. Thorne. We've had a string of robberies in these wealthy neighborhoods. People driving fancy rental cars, casing houses." I stared at him, my jaw tight. The implication was so clear, it was practically policy. "Officer, I can assure you, we're just a family trying to get our tired kids back to their beds." His eyes narrowed. He shined his flashlight back into the car, this time letting it linger on the floor of the back seat. "What's that under the seat there? I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle, sir." My blood ran cold. It was a classic, manufactured probable cause. "There is nothing under the seat but a beach towel and my son's flip-flops, officer." "I didn't ask what was there," he snapped, his voice rising. "I told you to step out of the car. Now." His hand dropped to his holster, unsnapping the retention strap. In the back, Maya's crying turned into a terrified wail. Sarah gasped my name. My mind was a split screen. On one side, the father, terrified for his family, wanting to shrink and make this all go away. On the other, the agent, cataloging every procedural violation, every threat indicator, every legal line being crossed. Miller yanked my car door open with a screech of metal. "Let's go! Hands where I can see them!" he yelled, his face inches from mine. He was high on the power, drunk on the intimidation. He saw a black man in an expensive car in his town, and his brain filled in the rest of the story for him. He had no idea who he was talking to. He had no idea the lines he was about to cross. As he reached in to grab my arm, I turned my head slowly to face him, my expression hardening into something he didn't expect. I didn't move to resist. I didn't move to fight. Instead, my hand moved deliberately, not with the panic of a suspect, but with the chilling calm of a professional, reaching for the inside pocket of my jacket. Miller's eyes widened in theatrical alarm. "He's reaching!" he screamed to his partner. "Gun!" The world compressed into a single, terrifying second. The other officer's weapon was already out, a dark, ugly shape against the festive backdrop of the town's streetlights. I heard Sarah let out a strangled cry from the passenger seat. My son Leo's breath hitched in a sob. In that frozen moment, I wasn't an agent. I was a target. I was every headline, every statistic, every nightmare a man who looks like me has about a routine traffic stop gone wrong. My entire world, my wife, my children, was inside this car, watching a man with a gun decide if I would live or die based on a lie shouted by his partner. My hand froze inside my jacket. My movements had to be slower than slow motion, more deliberate than a bomb squad technician's. My voice, when it came out, was a low, steady baritone that cut through the hysteria. "Officer," I said. My eyes locked on Miller's. "My name is Special Agent Marcus Thorne, Federal Bureau of Investigation. I am unarmed. I am reaching for my credentials. My service weapon is secured in a locked case in the trunk, as per travel regulations." I articulated every syllable with painstaking clarity. It was the same tone I used to talk down hostage-takers. Calm, authoritative, unbreakable. Miller's face contorted, a mixture of rage and a flicker of something new, uncertainty. The younger officer, whose gun was now leveled at my chest, glanced at his partner, looking for confirmation. He hadn't expected this. Slowly, using only my thumb and forefinger, I drew out my leather credential case. I didn't flip it open with a dramatic flair. I held it, closed, between two fingers and presented it. "You can take it, you can verify it. But you will do it calmly, and your partner will lower his weapon. Now." The last word wasn't a request. It was an order, imbued with the full weight of my federal authority. The shift in the air was palpable. Miller hesitated, his eyes darting from my face to the credentials, to his partner's drawn gun, and back again. The gears were grinding in his head. This wasn't the script he had written. He snatched the case from my hand and flipped it open. His flashlight beam fell upon my photo ID, and the gold FBI badge nestled beside it. The silence that followed was louder than his shouting. It was a silence filled with the dawning, catastrophic realization of his mistake. "Put it away, rookie," he muttered to his partner, not even looking at him. The younger officer holstered his weapon, looking deeply uncomfortable. Miller stared at my credentials for a long moment, as if trying to will them into being fake. When he finally looked back at me, the bluster was gone, replaced by a sullen, venomous resentment. "If you're an agent," he sneered, trying to regain some semblance of control, "you should know better than to make sudden moves during a stop." I didn't even blink. "The only sudden moves here were yours, Officer Miller. You conducted a pretextual stop without reasonable suspicion. You manufactured probable cause to search my vehicle, and you created a deadly force situation in front of my children for absolutely no reason. You didn't run my plates, did you? You'd have seen it was a rental from a major corporation. You didn't run my license, or you'd have seen the flag on my file. You just saw a black family in a nice car and decided we were criminals. Every word was a nail in the coffin of his career, and he knew it. Sarah had her phone out now, discreetly recording from her lap. Now here's what's going to happen, I continued, my voice still dangerously quiet. You are going to return my credentials, and you are going to call your watch commander or a supervisor to this scene. We're going to have a conversation about your conduct, about this entire stop. Panic flared in Miller's eyes. A supervisor. That was the last thing he wanted. That meant reports. That meant internal affairs. That meant the end of his cushy gig harassing tourists. There's no need for that, he said, trying for a conciliatory tone that sounded like gravel in a blender. Just a misunderstanding. We can all just go on about our night. The time for misunderstandings was over when your partner drew his weapon on me in front of my family, I said, my voice hardening. Call your supervisor. Miller stood there, trapped. The lights of his own cruiser flashed across his face, illuminating the sweat beading on his forehead. He looked from me to Sarah's phone and back. He was a cornered animal, and cornered animals do stupid things. He made a decision. It was a terrible one. Instead of reaching for his radio, he took a step forward, his hand balling into a fist. You know what? I think these credentials are fake. He threw my ID and badge onto the driver's seat. And I think you're obstructing an investigation. You're under arrest for impersonating a federal officer. He lunged, grabbing for my arm again, this time with the clear intent of dragging me out of the car and into a pair of handcuffs. His lunge was clumsy, fueled by desperation rather than tactics. It was the move of a man trying to erase a monumental screw-up with an even bigger one. Before his fingers could even graze my sleeve, I moved. It wasn't a fight. It was a simple, fluid redirection of his momentum, a technique from a dozen defensive tactics courses. I pivoted slightly in my seat, catching his wrist and forearm, using his own forward motion to twist him off balance. He stumbled against the car door with a grunt of surprise, his arm now locked in a hold that was both painful and completely immobilizing. He was pinned, his face pressed against the window frame, my grip like steel on his arm. The rookie officer, seeing his partner suddenly neutralized, fumbled for his weapon again, his eyes wide with shock. "Don't," I commanded, my voice like ice. "Touch that weapon, and I will consider it an act of aggression against a federal agent. Your partner just attempted to assault me and is now trying to unlawfully arrest me. You are seconds away from becoming an accessory to a federal crime." The young officer froze, his hand hovering over his holster. He was out of his depth, a kid caught in a Category 5 hurricane he couldn't comprehend. "Sarah," I said, my voice not wavering, "call 911. Tell them we have 2 officers who have created a dangerous situation and require immediate supervisor assistance. Give them our location and tell them Special Agent Thorne of the FBI is on the scene and has detained 1 officer for assault." Sarah's hands were shaking, but she did it, her voice clear and strong as she relayed the information to the dispatcher. Miller, pinned and breathing heavily, started to struggle. "You're gonna regret this, Thorne," he hissed, his face reddening. "No, Officer Miller," I said, applying just enough pressure to his wrist to silence him. "You started regretting this the moment you flipped on your lights. You just don't know the full extent of it yet." Within 3 minutes, the quiet street was flooded with light and sirens. 2 more cruisers and a black, unmarked sedan carrying the watch commander, a harried-looking captain named Richards, screeched to a halt. When Richards stepped out and saw one of his men being restrained by a man calmly sitting in the driver's seat of a family SUV, his face went pale. He approached cautiously. "What in God's name is going on here?" I released Miller, who stumbled back, clutching his arm and glaring at me. I leaned out the window slightly. "Captain Richards? I'm Special Agent Marcus Thorne. Your officer Miller conducted an illegal stop, attempted an illegal search, escalated to the point of drawing a weapon on an unarmed man in front of his children, and then attempted to arrest me on a bogus charge after I identified myself as a federal agent. My wife has video of the entire latter half of the encounter." Richards looked from my steely face to Miller's sputtering, guilty one, then to the terrified faces of my children in the back seat. The truth of the situation settled over him like a shroud. He wasn't just dealing with a pissed-off tourist. He was standing at the epicenter of a multi-agency incident that could end careers and cost his city millions. The next hour was a blur of official procedure. Statements were taken. Sarah's video was downloaded as evidence. My credentials were run and verified by a very flustered dispatcher, whose voice I could hear crackling over the radio. Miller and his partner were ordered back to the station, stripped of their weapons, and placed on administrative leave, pending an immediate internal and federal investigation. Captain Richards personally apologized to me and my family at least a dozen times. He was professional and mortified, a man trying to clean up an unthinkable mess. He offered us anything, a hotel escort, dinner, whatever we needed. I just wanted to get my kids to bed. Back at the beach house after Leo and Maya were finally asleep, their tear-streaked faces peaceful against their pillows, Sarah and I sat on the deck, listening to the waves crash against the shore. The peace I'd felt just a few hours earlier seemed like a distant memory, tainted by the ugly reality that had invaded it. "He was going to arrest you," Sarah said quietly, staring out into the darkness. "Or worse. All because—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. I took her hand, but he didn't. They picked the wrong car, the wrong family. They picked the one person they shouldn't have. The next morning my phone rang. It was my supervisor from the Bureau's D.C. field office. News travels fast. He'd already been briefed by the local police chief and had seen the preliminary report from Captain Richards. "Marcus," he said, his voice grim. "First, are you and your family okay?" "We're shaken, but we're okay," I said. "Good. Second, the Department of Justice is opening a civil rights investigation into the Seacrest Point Police Department. The U.S. Attorney's Office is looking at federal charges against Miller for assault on a federal officer and deprivation of rights under color of law. They found a pattern of similar stops, all targeting minorities. You just blew the whole thing wide open." A small, grim sense of satisfaction settled in my chest. It wasn't the vacation I'd wanted, but it had become something else, something necessary. I looked out the window at the ocean, watching the morning sun glitter on the waves. My son was already down on the beach, digging in the sand, his fear from the night before replaced by the simple joy of a new day. We hadn't been defeated. We were still here. My job was to protect people, to stand against the darkness. Last night the darkness came for my family, and it found out exactly who I was. Our vacation had been violated, but in the end, justice was going to get its day in the sun.